5th Board of Zoning Appeals Site Design Meeting. Virtual meeting protocol. Staff will control the slides displayed throughout the meeting. Applicants, staff, board members, and members of the public should give their name first whenever speaking. Applicants and members of the public must be sworn in before speaking for the first time. Only attendees who have registered to speak before the deadline at noon today may speak during the meeting. Video and microphone have been disabled for all attendees. Attendees will only be given the capabilities to speak when they are called on during the public comment period. Board members who need to recuse themselves from voting will be temporarily removed from the meeting and readmitted prior to addressing the next item. If the board needs to go into executive session, they will call into a separate conference line, and all video and audio on Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they are ready to return to the regular meeting. Chat obviously has been disabled for everyone, and this meeting is being recorded. I will now turn it over to Mr. Joel Adrian.
Thank you, Eric. This is the May 5th, 2021 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals Site Design. Present are Amanda Barton, Ruthie Ravenel, Jeff Webb, Paula Murphy, Calvin Yuji, Andrew Hargett, and myself, Joel Adrian. Present from the planning staff are Eric Schultz and Lee Batchelder. These proceedings are being recorded. We ask that those who speak identify themselves for the record. We will conduct this meeting in usual fashion. We will first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, usually the Board of Zoning Appeals treats the matter as being uncontested and passes it as a matter of course. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We will then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application. Open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We will then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals Site Design has the authority to do three things. 1, hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. 2, grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And 3, grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54(9)24 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate, make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum are present and qualified to vote. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. That A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Public comment order on each application. The chair announces each application followed by staff presentation and recommendation. Staff will call on the applicant to present their application after being sworn in by the chair. Staff will open the public comment period to receive comments from registered attendees in favor, first spoken, then written. Each speaker will be sworn in by the chair. Staff will then recognize registered attendees for public comments in opposition after speaker is sworn in, first spoken, then written. Staff will recognize the applicant for a short rebuttal. And then, of course, the chair will then close the public comment period and begin board discussion. Providing comment. If you submitted a request to speak on an item before the deadline, staff will call your name when it is your turn to speak and enable your microphone. Your microphone will be disabled after you are done speaking. You may only speak once for each item, and you must state your name and address for the record, or you will not be permitted to provide comment. Board discussion. Following public comment period, board members can make comments, ask questions, and make motions. After a motion and a second, board members will vote aye in favor or nay not in favor. If a vote is not unanimous, the chair will poll each member for their vote. The chairman will announce the vote on the motion and the final decision on the application. If a board member needs to recuse himself or herself, he or she will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back into the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. And again, if the board needs to go into executive session, they will call on to a separate conference line, and all video and audio on Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they are ready to return to the regular meeting. And with that said, Mr. Chairman, we'll move right into A, but because the canceled May meeting the first week in May due to Easter week was postponed to April 28th, I have not gotten the minutes prepared for this meeting, so they'll be deferred until the June meeting.
Oh, okay. All right, so we will start our agenda with A2, which is Sanders Road, West Ashley, the application number 2105-05A2, TMS number of 286-0000001. Request a variance from section 54.327 to allow the removal of 5 grand trees and zoned DI RI.
And that is another error, Scribner's error. That's actually DR. We'll get to that. So
Okay.
here is the application. It's zone DR9. The parcel, it's under the same ownership. So I put an asterisk on the west side of Sanders Road that we'll be dealing with today. As you can see, the property as it is in its configuration today is zone DR9 and LB. We'll be dealing with the DR9 section. You can see here the aerial. It's south of that vacant or that transmission line that is devoid of vegetation. So it's south of that. You can see rows of pine trees. It's basically a pine plantation with some hardwoods mixed in. Basically, due to the wetland that bisects the site, and the top of your sheet goes up to that transmission line, so they're only dealing with the DR9 piece. And really tonight, you're only dealing with the southern side, plan south of the wetland that bisects the site. You can see there are a couple colored circles there, one being red. That is a staff level F. That tree is totally eaten up, and I think it was actually struck by lightning. And then 4 other X's. You got 4 D grade trees and 1 C grade tree, the yellow. The blue trees are B grade trees. Beezer Homes has had natural directions out to look at the trees. This is their cover letter. This is their field notes and their notes on the trees. And I want to go back and explain the site plan. So obviously, due to the wetland, we have an existing single-family neighborhood on the south side of Sanders Road. So they're aligning their cul-de-sac, the proposed cul-de-sac, directly across from that intersection. And because it's DR9, they're entitled to do single-family attached units. So you can see 4 pods of attached units lining each side, and basically at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock on the cul-de-sac, taking advantage of the available high ground. This property is in the Church Creek Basin, drainage basin. So they have very stringent and restrictive stormwater requirements. So as you can see, there's 3 fairly nice sized ponds proposed for this relatively small subdivision, the cul-de-sac on the south side of the wetland complex, and then the U-shaped road on the north side where there's no hardwood trees. So after I went out on site, I agree with the arborist findings. However, near the one blue live oak, grand live oak, in the pond that looks like a pretty much like a diamond shape, there were 2 other non-grand live oaks And they're the smaller blue circles with two arrows pointing to them. I think a 15-inch and a 23-inch live oak. So I said, you know, because a couple trees require a special exception, the fact-finding function of the board would be to set aside category 1 trees. So they modified their pond at my request to save 2 non-grand live oaks. So the 27.5 red oak, that's on the just inside the Sanders Road right away. You can see it's a triple leader. However, that union occurs above 4.5 feet, and then just about at 4.5 feet, you can see a cavity. So they put a D grade on the red oak due to that union and that positioning of the cavity. The 12-13 tulip poplar, again, often you'll find double leader, triple leader tulip poplars. Obviously, this is probably a stump sprout from when they prepared the pine plantation. The 30.5 beech, this section of West Ashley, you come across a lot of beech trees. This would be what I consider the mother beech. There's a lot of smaller beech trees, saplings, and younger trees around it amongst the pine. But as you can see, this one has some serious decay and cavities in it. And then, of course, the 29-inch hickory, I would almost classify this, it was very close to being an F, but there were a couple substantial water sprouts, if you will, but the top, as you can see, was damaged, grade D. Staff recommends approval with the condition to plant 91 caliber inches of native canopy trees on the project site. Must have a certified arborist prune and treat the grand trees to be preserved. Must use 4-foot chain link fences, tree protection barricades, and must require the required impervious setback for the live oak near the proposed townhouse, and no fill is permitted within to encroach into the TBZ. I forgot to mention that tree. I'll go back to the site plan. The green or the blue area behind the first set of townhouses as you enter into the cul-de-sac between the townhouses and the pond, this will end up being a backyard tree. It doesn't quite look like a circle because I had them survey the canopy to ensure that we wouldn't have to prune severely to go vertical. But if you can imagine, there's a blue circle within that amorphic looking blue area indicating so the units are outside the protection zone, but the canopy I was a little concerned about. So they did go the extra effort and go out and survey the canopy. So that's the tree that needs to remain at no fill within the TBZ. And of course, it should drain to the rear to the pond. So with that said, we need to identify, I'll keep it on the site plan. We needed to identify, Scott, if you will, Thomas James with Thompson Hutton. Thomas, can you hear us? Unmute yourself, James, or Thomas.
Yes, I'm here. This is James. Can you hear me?
I'm
Yes.
sorry, it is James
Gotcha.
Thomas. I get your first and last name reversed.
I know.
Sorry about that. Is there any other member of your team that we need to identify?
I'm not sure if anybody else is on right now. I can't see the full participant list.
Yeah, I didn't get a list of any other names except for yours. So, all right, Mr.
All right.
Chairman, you have James.
Thank you, James. I'm going to swear you in for the record, and then if you would state your full name and address. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
This is James Thomas, 682 Johnny Dodds Boulevard, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. I think Eric did a great job explaining the site and the trees that we obviously are requesting to be removed in their condition, and just explaining how we did accommodate the request to save the 15-inch and 23-inch live oaks that are within the one pond there. That is the compromise there was kind of the reason why we're requesting the removal of the C grade poplar on the other pond, just to accommodate that area. Yeah, the majority of the reason why we're requesting the removal of both the 29-inch hickory and the 30-inch beech are to accommodate stormwater at this site. As Eric mentioned, we are in the Church Creek drainage basin. We are also near the 100-year floodplain in the rear of the cul-de-sac. So the reason we're attempting to remove those trees is to have our stormwater discharge farther into the wetland so that we would have limited fill on the site and to reduce the impact to the rest of the area. So, but otherwise, I think Eric did a great job explaining it, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you. Eric, do we have anybody registered or that wrote in that was in favor or opposed to the application needs to be heard?
We do not have anyone that registered to speak in opposition or in favor, nor did I receive any public comment.
Okay, then we will close this application to the public and open it up to the board for discussion and questions. I'll start and say that I think that Eric, you did do a great job of explaining. I think the pictures were very, very helpful. I love the fact that we can save those 2 trees at the front. And I believe that the application is good.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So the retention pond that's kind of shaped like a shape,
Yes.
they mentioned that the other pond was reduced because it's drainage, the 10-year flood plan. Is there a possibility to reduce this pond and still have enough reserve space to save that tree?
No, sir. So we were, there are pretty strict requirements in Church Creek, and we're meeting them now. So we had reduced that. The A-shaped pond originally was a little bit larger, and we were removing those 2 B-grade oaks, and we were saving the C-grade poplar. So that was kind of where we shifted it. The current requirements with the city with regard to easement widths at the top of the bank and littoral shelves doesn't give us room to really shrink these any further.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions? Or any other comments?
Eric, you gonna have anything about them trying to save some of the seedlings from the mother beech tree over there?
Well, that's a very good question. The freshwater wetland is forested, obviously. I go back, it's not a standing water. So I believe there are some beech seedlings in that wetland amongst some of the pine. And of course, that's a big portion of why I felt they met the hardship test, because of the available high ground. If you look at the shape of the wetlands and how it wraps around, you couldn't do a loop road to come out and meet the other street across the, from the subdivision across the street. So they were kind of forced into this cul-de-sac. So I think there are other, with the wetlands being saved, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, James, is there any wetland buffer required by the Corps? I'm not sure, because you are putting pipe into the wetlands.
Right. On this site, we do not have any wetland. We're not completing any wetland fills on this site. I think that's important to note. The only impacts we have to the wetland is to actually expand it a bit to get our pipe into there. So we're excavating it out. We will, if you look at that site plan, where you see the dashed line that kind of runs down towards that, the beech tree that we're removing, that's going to be about the limit of our impact. So we will be saving the area between the beach and that yellow 36-inch live oak, I would assume that would be the area that Eric's discussing that might have some saplings in it, and we shouldn't be impacting into that area. We're only running through there. Like I said, we have pretty limited fill in the area, and we're only running through that location to extend a stormwater outfall pipe. So we'll have limited impact to that location.
I got you. Shouldn't be in the operative word there.
Yeah, could we though, I mean, since they've got that grand tree, the yellow, the C grade grand tree, maybe we can request that, that the tree protection kind of incorporate that space between it and the D grade beach that's coming out. And that way our protection fencing would protect anything that's in there.
I suspect I suspect there will be silt fence run basically on that dash line, as James talked about, that northern side of what looks like a drainage easement going to. So there are limits of construction. We'll address that with silt fence.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
I make a motion that we move to approve the staff recommendations.
I'll second. This is Ruthie Ravenel.
All right. So we have motion for approval with staff conditions by Ms. Barton and seconded by Mr. Ravenel. I will go and do the roll and just say aye in favor or nay not in favor. Ms. Barton,
I in favor.
Ms. Ravenel,
Aye in favor.
Mr. Webb,
Aye in favor.
Ms. Murphy,
Aye in favor.
Mr. Yuji,
I in favor.
Mr. Hargit,
I in favor.
and Chairman Adrian is also aye in favor. So we are approved 7-0. Mr. James, thank you for your time today.
So much, everyone.
All right, so then we will move on to our next item, which is going to be item A3. A3 is William E. Murray Boulevard and Glen McConnell Parkway, application number 210505A3. The TMS numbers are 306-00-00933, 973, and 975. Request a variance from section 54.327 to allow the removal of 3 grand trees. Request a special exception from section 54.327 to allow the removal of 3 grand trees. And it is zone GB.
So I just threw this slide in. This was advertised correctly with 3 and 3, and it was deferred from the April 28th. This is the application. Their explanation on hardship. We're dealing with 3 parcels presently owned by MUSC Medical. I highlighted one, but they are zone GB. Some time ago, MUSC had purchased these properties, and I believe basically the left side, if you will, first, and then acquired track 2C, if you will, later. They were planning to do a medical office complex out here, and they moved through the city approval process to do an early site package. So that's why you see many trees on the right track 2C parcel and very little on the track 2A.
Hey, Eric.
Yes.
Let me stop you for a second. This is an
Yes.
project. I need to get booted.
Yes. Yes, that's right. Obviously working for MUSC. So Mr. Chairman, Andrew Hargit will recuse himself. And Scott, could you remove him?
All right, thank you, Eric.
All right. So this was the original submittal. And between zoning and DRB staff, we've had many meetings with the applicant and their design team and felt that this wasn't at a point where DRB could support this site plan. So we talked about a lot of different ideas and so on and so forth. So they modified their plan to this plan, and it's one that's very close. It still needs a little tweaking, if you will. But as you can see, there's 6 grand trees. Obviously, this shows one combined parcel. The majority of the site will be multifamily, and then a few townhouse complex units on the triangular piece on the planned south side, west side, if you will, of William Mary Boulevard. It's critical because we have the curve as you come off Glen McConnell to have the 2 driveways align opposing one another. So as you can see, we have the driveway to the larger site and the driveway to the smaller site opposing, and then a secondary access further to the east. You're dealing with 3 trees that require a variance and 3 trees requiring a special exception, 3 D grade trees and 2 C grade trees. As you can see, there's 1 B grade tree between the parking, the pond, and the 4-story building, and then 1 is in the parking lot. And we've tweaked this enough, and they're very tight on their required parking. And the tree that is a D grade in the parking lot, you see it kind of in that island. Could you increase that island? It's partially uprooted, you'll see. So this is a zoom in on that. You have a 7.589 water oak D requires a special exception. A 1514 white oak D requiring a special exception. And tree number 21 is a 1014 water oak, a D requiring a special exception. This is the east side of the parcel. You can see our C grade tree by the large linear pond adjacent to Glen McConnell is being saved in a parking lot island. And of course the B grade tree with preliminary grading, conceptual grading, they're thinking it will have to be in a partial tree well. I'll address that in a minute. But here we have another 6, 7, 11 water oak D requiring a special exception. And so actually, and then a 6, 7, 11 live oak C requiring a variance, and then a 26-inch red maple C requiring a variance. So actually one of the advertised variance trees moved to a special exception. So that's a lesser requirement. And then of course, tree 17 was D and F in the middle of the building. Here we are out in the field verifying tree grades. This is the letter from this consulting arborist. So this is a city exhibit. After further study and again, further conversations with DRB, this exhibit will be read into the conditions, but basically I'm asking that the parking lot island be enlarged around the C grade tree by the removal of 2 parking spaces. And then the partial tree well being enlarged, actually moved further away from the B grade tree, and that would require the removal of 7 parking spaces. So staff recommends approval with the following conditions. Must plant 100.75 caliber inches of native canopy trees on the project site. Must have a certified arborist prune and treat all grand and protected trees to be preserved within 25 feet of any construction activity. Must use 4-foot chain link fence as tree protection barricades, and must maintain the existing grade in the required TBZ for the 2 grand trees to be preserved. Must increase the proposed tree well distance from the base of the B grade tree and create additional green space by removing parking spaces adjacent to the grand trees as shown on the city exhibit. Must provide positive drainage away from the TBZs. So with that said, we need to identify Mr. Paul Peoples. Nicole Scott. Katie Harrigan. Lowell Zimmer. And let's see, is Paul Peoples on a telephone line?
No, can you hear me?
Yes, Paul. Who else from your team should we identify?
You said Nicole, Adam, Lowell, and Katie. That should be it. Oh, and Mike Russell is on the line in case there's any questions for the arborist.
Yes. Mike Russell and Adam Tucker. So I hope everybody can hear us. Chairman, I'm not sure how you want to swear them in as a group or individual.
So why don't we do this? If y'all can, if you have an order that you're going to speak, I'll just swear you in one at a time as you're getting ready to speak. That way we know, instead of trying to do it all at one time and having no idea who actually says yes or no. So Paul, are you going to start the presentation?
No, so Nicole is going to start, and then everyone else is more or less here for questions, so we can just swear in as needed.
Okay. Nicole, I will swear you in, and then if you would state your full name and address, and then the floor will be yours, okay? Nicole, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, wonderful. The floor is yours.
We can hardly hear you, Nicole.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're having super technical difficulties over here. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Cheryl Shoun is here with me. It's Cheryl, last name S-H-O-U-N, and she's actually going to speak first.
All right, Cheryl, let me swear you in for the record.
Yes, sir.
All right, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right, if you would state your full name and address.
Cheryl Shoun, S-H-O-U-N, 205 King Street, Charleston, South Carolina, 29401.
Wonderful. Please go ahead and present.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schultz and board members. As you heard, Nicole and I are here together as legal counsel for the applicant this evening, on the request for the variance and the request for the special exception for the total of the 6 grand trees. Mr. Peoples' letter of March 1st, 2021, that's before the board, actually does a great job of setting forth the test, the 4-part test, and the issues for the variance for trees 5, 15, and 16. And Mr. Schultz went through those very carefully and explained them. Mr. Schultz was kind enough to accompany our representative on the site, helped us look at these trees and evaluate these trees. And I'm happy to go through the elements of the variance requirements step by step if the board wishes for me to do that. But again, I think Mr. Peoples' letter sets that out in great detail. And as far as trees number 1, 2, and 21, again, number 1 being a water oak graded D, number 2 also a water oak graded D, and number 21 a water oak graded D, if my notes are correct here. And again, these particular grades were all assigned by our certified arborist. We do have the arborist on the phone line should the board have any questions whatsoever. But these trees, we think, pursuant to 54-329, meet the test because of the condition of the trees, all 3 of them being in poor health. And as you're aware, the removal of a grand tree will allow for protection of a specimen that would otherwise be removed if the grand tree is saved, or the grand tree is located within a proposed building, footprint, street, road, driveway, drainage way, or parking area with no other reasonable design or economically reasonable alternative existing. There's photographs of all 6 of the trees that we're addressing, those with the variance, those under the special exception. 1 and 2 is exhibited with stump sprouts, and number 21 is hollow. We appreciate all the efforts that have been put forth with DRB and Mr. Schultz in helping us move this to this point. And in fact, as Mr. Schultz mentioned, we were deferred from late April until this meeting to allow us to continue to work to reach a plan that is acceptable to the city. Our client has considered the conditions recommended by the city and is in a position, assuming approvals granted otherwise, to accept those conditions.
Excellent, thank you. All right, do we have anybody else that feels they would like to speak at this time, or do we want to see if there's people that were registered in favor or opposed? Is there anybody that needs to add anything to the application, I guess is what I'm asking.
I think we're good to proceed.
Okay, thank you. So Eric, did we have anybody that registered to speak in favor or opposed, or emailed?
Mr. Chairman, I did not receive any individuals registered to speak in opposition or in favor. However, I did receive one public comment, and this was submitted in prep for the meeting that got deferred. And it's submitted by Jacob Beach, address not provided, but on 4/9/21 at 9:18 a.m. And it reads as such: these are huge lots. Design around the trees rather than removing them. Be creative. 3.93 acres, 5 acres, and a smaller parcel at 1.07 acres. There appears to be a Spinks gas station plan for the adjoining lot with a water body. Smart planning, Charleston. How many grand trees are you going to allow the neighboring lot to cut down? So in response to that, due west, plan west of this project, there is another fairly large parcel that actually sits in the corner of the intersection of Glen McConnell and West Wildcat Boulevard. And yes, the city has been reviewing both through DRB and TRC a Spinks gas station, convenience store with a fairly large canopy with the gas dispensing units, as well as a car wash. To date, that project has not required any variances. They're meeting their 15 trees per acre requirement, as well as working around a couple of grand trees on that site. So that's the reference to the Spinks gas station to plan right of this project.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and close the application to the public, and we will open it to the board for discussion. So Eric, if you could, just for my clarification, we've got 2 grand trees that require variance, and on this site plan that we're looking at currently, which are they, the 2 C grade trees north of the 4-story building? Yes.
So tree number 15 is the live oak, and tree number 16 is the red maple. Yes, they are north of the F grade tree.
Okay, and so then the I can't see the actual tree numbers on this, but the one that's closest to the pond, which tree is that? Is that the maple or the live oak?
I believe that one's reading tree 15.
So it'd be the live oak.
Let me see if we can't get clarity on this one. Yes, that's tree 15 by the pond.
Okay, and then do we have a picture of that tree?
Tree 15 is a 6-7 live oak grade C, 2 trunks don't count. You can see I'm in front of it. It's a stump sprout, basically.
Okay, all right.
Again, I believe the history of this land decades ago, prior to the high school being built, prior to all the other activity around this was managed timberland.
Okay, all right. So Andrew, I guess I would defer to you on your opinion and thoughts on.
Andrew's out of the
live oak.
meeting.
Oh, dadgummit, that's right.
Yeah. Andrew's out of the meeting.
Okay, all right. So Amanda, I guess I'll defer to you on your thoughts and opinions of that. The maple tree number 16, I think, was the other one requiring the variance, and the picture of it looks like there's some good damage to it.
Yeah, there's a cavity, I believe, right in the face of it there, above the ribbon.
So they're meeting their, I guess here's my question. Can we go back to the site plan? They're meeting their 15 protected trees per acre. And is that through trees left on the site, or is it mostly in that buffer area along Glen McConnell?
That's interesting. That's interesting you brought that up. Keep in mind that the tract A was denuded of trees through a early site package. And again, based on that acreage at the time, not the combined acreage, they met their 15 trees per acre by maintaining the trees in the Glen McConnell buffer. So now you have this piece here, and combined, that was a major discussion during some of the site planning discussions with, again, this was the original, you know, how could we possibly preserve some additional protected trees throughout the proposed apartment complex? This is where we got, and I'll let the engineer speak to the stormwater constraints and challenges they have. But as it stands now, they are confirming or have confirmed that with all those 8-inch diameter trees in the buffer and a few saved plan right against the Sphinx, that they meet their 15 trees per acre requirement.
See, that disturbs me, because the buffer's a requirement and we shouldn't be using a required buffer for the 15 trees per acre.
Well, I would argue that,
right?
yeah, I understand your point, but it's basically the tree protection is based on parcel, 15 trees per acre post-development on the parcel. So it's within I actually had them, because I knew that somebody was going to pick up on that. If you look at this original exhibit, see all the trees within the Glen McConnell Parkway? I said, I don't want you to have a discussion go down the road and kind of make it look like there's a lot more trees on your property. So I had them remove those in the Glen McConnell Parkway. As we know, that's going to get widened and there's a multi-use path. So I'm not so sure the future of those trees, but here we are with the buffer. And again, I made them recount to verify that requirement.
And this is Paul, if I can say something really quick. Yes, so for the early site package, our requirement for the 15 trees per acre is met primarily from the buffer plantings per the code. But once the site, and currently we're working on early site package, but with landscaping requirements and everything else, we do have a significant amount of dry detention basins throughout the site that we will have aquatic plants proposed in there, as well as some trees. So it's not like we're gonna only have the buffer trees throughout the site. We are gonna have some sort of above and beyond plantings once the site is actually developed. Unfortunately, the site requires approximately 4 feet of fill throughout the site. So it requires a significant amount of fill, and saving trees throughout the site just puts the trees in a bunch of holes and really puts their health in jeopardy. So we've really worked numerous site layouts with city staff and have come to believe that this is our best solution, and that we really will plant trees in the dry ponds once the site is fully developed.
Thank you. So, all right. Are there any other questions?
So I guess the question, the tree Joel was asking about, which is the live oak near the pond edge. is there any way to, I see our canopy is in what, 1, 2, 3 to 4 overhanging 4 contour lines.
Yeah.
Are they at a foot interval or what's the interval on those? I can't see.
Yeah, they're foot intervals. The tree is in a significant amount of fill.
Yeah. And even if we enlarged, took away a few spaces, then we'd be welling it on one side and having, you'd have to reconfigure the pond edge to wrap around.
Right.
Yeah.
I think looking at it and hearing the explanations, I think that they have done as good a job as expected or possible to utilize the site, save trees, and that the hardship test is met. Because if you force those 2 C grade trees to be maintained, then we start to reduce that parking even more. I mean, Eric's already yanked 9 spaces out on them. They've agreed to, if they get their approval, you know, and you'd be looking at probably another 9 spaces having to come out. Then all of a sudden they're not going to meet
Right, but
parking requirements.
economics aren't something that we're supposed to look at, right? It doesn't matter technically to us what's the feasibility level of their development, right? Because I mean, this is pretty much. I worked on West Ashley Park, and so I was out here way at the beginning when all this land was being done, and it's bad land, right? It's not good developable land. It's low, it's wet, you know, et cetera.
Right.
It's the bottom of the barrel, right? We're at the end of the good land. But I think to try to make that work, yeah, technically they're meeting it. I don't like it, but.
This is Ruthie. I have a question. This is probably a stupid question because I'm looking at my old thing here from a couple of days ago. Is there not a staff recommendation on this particular application?
There was.
There is.
Okay,
We
I
don't
missed
include-
it then.
Yeah, we don't include that on the public website because we're still developing those. So they get inserted for the meeting. So here's your recommendations. Must plant 100.75 caliber inches of native canopy trees on the site. Must have a certified arborist prune and treat all grand and protected trees to be preserved within 25 feet of any construction. Must use 4-foot chain link fence as tree protection barricades. And again, must maintain the existing grade in the required TBZ for the 2 grand trees to be preserved. That's interior to the site, obviously. Must increase the proposed tree well distance from the base of the grade B tree and create additional green space by removing parking spaces adjacent to the grand trees as shown on the city exhibit. Must provide positive drainage away from the TBZ. So this is the proposed, my scribble, if you will. It takes away 7 spaces. It puts a U-shaped tree well away from that B grade tree, and then the dry pond, you know, that all that area would be at grade, and then the dry pond would be a little deeper, and then enlarge the parking lot island around the C grade tree by the large linear pond at the top. Paul didn't allude to it, but their outfall is actually into the Glen McConnell right away. And I'll go back to this exhibit. If you know Glen McConnell, it starts to rise here because of the railroad viaduct plan left. And then, you know, it comes down and meets kind of existing grade, if you will. And there's a roadside swale in Glen McConnell. So this property is kind of, it doesn't have a very good outfall except for Glen McConnell, and the water's flowing plan right. It can't flow uphill. So that's the reason for Paul talking about sufficient fill to meet the stormwater requirements and then have an outfall to Glen McConnell.
Thank you for clarifying.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments? And if not, do we have anybody ready for a motion? There's got to be a motion somewhere.
I mean, I'll make a motion to approve with staff recommendations. I mean, I think, this is a process and I understand the hardship and I'm in favor with these recommendations. This is Ruthie.
Thank you, Ruthie. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
All right, so seconded by Mr. Webb. Okay, then I'm going to go through the roll. Ms. Barton,
I in favor.
all right, Ms. Ravenel,
I in favor.
Mr. Webb,
I in favor.
Ms. Murphy,
I in favor.
Mr. Yuji, Kelvin.
Sorry, I was muted. I in favor.
All right, thank you. And Chairman Adrian is I in favor also, so it is approved 6-0. Team, we thank you for your presentation today.
I'd like to put down on the record a statement that I think we should look back at our ordinance, because I don't think we should be using trees and required buffers to count for the acreage.
So noted.
Thank you.
I guess if it was revised, if you can't use that acreage, then maybe you'd have to remove that acreage from the overall calculation.
Yeah, it's just, in these areas, you just gotta clear cut everything, so it's just, then you're bringing in all that fill, it's just.
Right.
I mean, it's just problematic where it is and what it is.
All right, we will, thank you, Amanda. We'll move on to item B1.
Scott, I'm sorry, Chairman.
that's right.
Scott, could we notify Andrew to return?
Yeah, I'm good.
All
Okay,
right.
thank you, Andrew.
So we'll go to item B1, which is 149 Captain's Island Drive. The application number is 210505 B1. TMS number 27602010002. Request a variance from section 54.327 to allow the removal of 1 grand tree, zoned DI RI.
Okay, this is the application for 149 Captain's Island Drive. We're taking a trip to Daniel Island. This is the letter submitted by Aaron Stevens, the applicant for the request. DIRI means Rodin's Island or residential island. And this is a lot that is on the island, on the marsh side against Ralston Creek. 149. So this is an area with the house, its neighbor under construction. So it's just due left of that house that's shown there with the dock. The proposal is to build a single family house, obviously, and a garage carport out front. It does have a number of grand trees and 2 beautiful non-grand trees out front. The 27-inch live oak, as you can see, is being preserved on the left-hand side of the house. And then you have a 11.5, 14.5. They had it labeled 12, 15 on the right-hand side of the house. These are the photos submitted by the applicant. So the tree on the left is the tree to be preserved, 27-inch oak. It does have a small blemish in the base, and then the 11.5, 14.5 has greater blemishes and what I believe might have been fire damage from maybe when the island was it was managed as timber, and so it's got fire damage there. The applicant or the team, I should say, hired Marshall DeBow with Charleston Tree Experts. As you can see, this was March 3 of 2020 when he evaluated all the trees on the site. And I'll just kind of flip through this. He talks about, his process and his assignment and his processy interesting enough here, he used an increment core to really delve into the percent canopy or decay within the trunks down by the fire damaged, as he describes, fused extensive decay. And then his photos. This might have been a triple trunk tree. There is a little bit of wood there. It might have broken out, and then that might be scar tissue from when that broke out, or as he alludes to, maybe some fire damage based on the coloration in it. And then you can see how the canopy there. He calls it two trees, 1 and 2, but our rule is that when it's physically and visibly connected at the base, it's sharing a common root system. So we had to get away from the argument with live oaks, 2 acorns or 1, but sharing a common root system, if you will. This is 1 tree. Here's his increment core samples where it shows the discoloration in the wood. So then he returned April 1, 2021 to do further investigative work on the tree that was is being asked to be removed. So pretty thorough evaluation. Further pictures and signed. So we did get an email from Daniel Allen ARB, and it basically says that if the arborist report states that the tree is in decline, the ARB does not object to its removal, but city approval is required. And this is some dialogue back and forth from me with the owner. So staff recommends approval with the condition that must plant 26 caliber inches of native canopy trees on the site, must use 4-foot chain link fence to protect as the tree protection barricades, must provide a grading and landscape plan for staff review and approval. We're finding on these islands that there is some grading required, and there's been some cases where we didn't require the grading plan, and then we're addressing issues with the single family house plan approval. So, and then the certified arborist must prune and treat the grand trees to be preserved. So with that said, Scott, if we could identify Miss Erin Stevens, Marshall DeBow, and Mr. Theodore Jenkins. Erin, can you hear us? Unmute yourself, Erin.
Yes, I can hear you. Can y'all hear me? Yes,
very good. And I guess the chairman will take each of you individually, but do you want to start?
Sure. And it cut me off for a second, but just want to make sure Marshall, Ashley, and John were all let in as well.
Okay, Ashley. Ashley.
Should be Ashley Connolly.
Yes, Ashley Connolly. Sorry. Yes, Ashley Connolly.
And John.
Right. Okay, well.
And John Haley?
Yes.
John Haley. Very good. All right. So, Mr. Chairman, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Let me start with Erin swearing you in. I guess for the record, if you're going to speak first, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
All right, if you would state your full name and address.
Sure. My name is Erin Stevens. My address is 131 Line Street, Charleston.
Okay, floor is yours. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Eric, for the thorough introduction. As he mentioned, my name is Erin Stevens. I'm a landscape architect working on the project. And, I think Eric kind of gave you a good overview of what's going on this site. But I did want to introduce you to our project team that's here tonight in case you have questions for them. And just give a couple other pointers on what we found in our research of the site. So we have Marshall and Ashley here with us from Charleston Tree Experts. They were the arborists that evaluated the tree in March of 2020 and again in April of 2021. So they're able to speak to the unique conditions of the tree as well as the continued decline that they've observed over the last year. We also have John Haley on the line, who is the project architect, and he is available to answer any questions you have about the site plan. He worked really hard on this footprint to come up with a footprint that was able to preserve the much more healthy 27-inch live oak on the opposite side of the property, as well as several clusters of protected oaks. You see a few in front of the proposed house footprint, as well as some along the side, and then several in the rear near the marsh. And just one thing of note is that for the portion of the house adjacent to the grand oak, he has proposed using piers to protect that root zone. But if you have any specific questions about the process and the footprint, he's happy to answer those. And one other point I wanted to make, we did receive an email that I forwarded to Eric yesterday, I believe, but I guess it was not in time to get into the presentation, from the neighbor at 153 Captain's Island, which is the house directly adjacent to this tree, that also said that he was in support of our application for tree removal. And with that, I don't know if there's anything that Marshall or Ashley or John want to add, or if we're ready just to open it up for questions.
All right, thank you. I'll say, Marshall, Ashley, would you like to add anything, or?
I would like, I'm Ashley Connolly, I'm a qualified arborist with the Charleston Tree Experts.
All right, Ashley, let me swear you in for the record,
Sure,
and then you'll be able to speak. Thank you. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Excellent.
Yes.
Floor is back to you. Thank you.
So I just wanted to make sure that it was noted, the decay and the significant injury that's at the base, the buttress roots of these trees. I'm finding daily, even with the trees that we treat, because as it may be known, our firm is known for tree preservation, that is as much imidacloprid as we put into the ground for these trees to systemically draw up, we cannot prevent the constant infestation of termites and wood-boring beetles when there are wounds of this significance. So I just wanted to make sure that was noted.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else on the team that would like to speak? If not, then Mr. Schultz, was there anybody registered to speak in favor or oppose the application?
Mr. Chairman, there was nobody registered to speak and or in favor or in opposition. And I do recall glancing at that email. I apologize. My life is a little crazy, but it is correct that Aaron, the neighbor, did write a letter of support.
Okay, fantastic. Then we will close this application to the public, and it will be opened to the board for discussion and questions. I'll start and say that I really appreciate seeing the. I'm sure it wasn't intended that we would have two arborist reports a year apart, but it was helpful to see that the tree has declined in that 12 months, and I would imagine that it probably doesn't have a whole lot of hope for rebounding and going in the opposite direction. So I personally am in favor of the application.
Yeah, I am too, and I think it's a good idea to start asking for the grading and the grading plan on these sites. I think it's a good idea. And I thought I saw in the information that Daniel Island was on board with it, right?
That is correct.
The ARB said they didn't have any objections.
Let me also state, if I could, Paula Murphy had to sign out. Apparently, there was something that came up she had to address, so she is not on this application right now.
Well, I think they did a good job and did a lot of research on it. Andrew, did you have any opinion?
Well, I mean, they're live oaks, and termites don't attack live wood. They seldom kill trees. So, I mean, you can treat it with imidacloprid. I don't think you have to because it's just mining out wet wood. But I mean, those trees are fixable just as they're, but it's just as easy to cut them down. I mean, it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the others. They're live oaks. But the thing is, that's a pinch point on the site. I mean, you got to pick. And I think between the two, I think they did a good job of picking the right tree to keep and the right tree to get rid of. You know, and that's, I think to me, that's the hardship is you've got these trees on both sides of the lot. Which one do you want us to keep? Which one do you want us to get rid of? And I think they absolutely made the correct choice in which one to keep. Could you keep those trees? Sure. You know, take work, it would take time, it would take money. But, you know, at the same point in time, they're doing the right thing by keeping the healthier tree and getting rid of the one that's going to require more work. So I think it's a good removal.
All right.
What's the driveway going to be doing?
This is Erin. I can speak to that. We haven't designed that yet. We definitely are designing it to work around those 2 trees in the front, but we don't have it fully designed. But obviously that'll be included in the required site and grading plan. We'll have that information available once we, develop it further.
Yeah, I was just wondering if,
Right.
is one of those blocks garage or is it a garage underneath, to the right, or I'm just asking.
John, do you want to that a little bit?
This is John Haley. The block in the front.
John,
box
I'm
is-
sorry to interrupt you, John. I'll have to swear you in for the record also.
Okay,
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God.
I do. This is John Haley at 7 Green Hill Street, Charleston, South Carolina.
All right, you're up.
Okay,
Awesome.
so I was just explaining the box on the front, sort of to the left is the 2-car garage. And then there's a 1-car garage that will be attached to the house. It's the small rectangle that comes out by the other 2 oaks. So the driveway, I did come up with a concept for the driveway, but I think that will be further designed by the landscape architects once the house footprint is set.
All right, thank you. Any other further questions or comments from the board? Or do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve with staff recommendations.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second. This is Ruthie.
Excellent. Okay, so our motion is approval with staff conditions by Ms. Barton, seconded by Ms. Ravenel. We'll go through the roll. Ms. Barton,
Aye in favor.
Ravenel,
I in favor.
Mr. Webb,
Aye in favor.
Mr. Yuji,
I in favor.
Mr. Hargit,
I in favor.
Mr. Adrian is also aye in favor, so it is approved 6-0. We thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will move on to item B2. And Paula Murphy, I think, is gone for the meeting, so it's going to be just the 6 of us that are here. Item B2 is King and Spring Street. Application number is 210505B2. TMS numbers are 46008, 02015, 016, 021, 098, 100 through 104. Request a variance from section 54.327 to allow the removal of 1 grand tree. Request a special exception from section 54.327 to allow the removal of 2 grand trees. Request a variance from section 54.327 to omit the 15 protected trees per acre requirement, zoned GBA.
Okay. This is 2 back-to-back projects. So I want to talk a little bit holistically about the entire block bound by Line Street, St. Philip, Spring, and King. The majority of that block is presently owned by the Evening Post, Post and Courier. And there are two projects. We're dealing with the southern project, if you will, first, and then the next application will deal with the northern project. Two different design teams and owners and programs, but all moving pretty much through the review and approval process simultaneously. So this is, as advertised, the parcels involved. You can see there's numerous parcels. Note that also there's a small alley that through many discussions with the city and working with city senior staff, that alley will be abandoned. And then I'll speak of a pedestrian alley being introduced further north to bisect the block, if you will. So there's a process involved in that, and they're working through that presently. Note that the parcels to the south, there's some historic residential type structures on Spring, a new multi-family project at the King and Spring intersection, and then some other residential properties on St. Philip. Zone GB, Rogers Alley, as you can see. So under construction, under Pink Bellies is the multi-family project. You can see the smaller residential project or residence structures on the south west corner. And then Rogers Alley and a lot of surface parking lot. There are 3 or 4 remaining retail spaces at the terminus of Columbus Street, which will be removed. And then Post and Courier surface parking lot. You can see a row of trees basically north of Rogers. They're trees that were planted, I assume. There are a bunch of holly trees, and then I'll get into the other trees in a moment here. This is the application. Justification for hardship, addressing the 4 hardship. Cover sheet of the exhibits proposed. So again, we're dealing with the, this kind of shows you the entire block, if you will, minus the alleys. We're dealing with Liberty King Street Senior Living. And it has been through Sketch Plan Wednesday with PRC staff and TRC, and there's been a lot of discussion about vehicular movement and entry and exit points. So I'll get into that in just a moment. So this is the exhibit. So your main access will be, well, I shouldn't talk in terms of main. A point of ingress egress will be off the Spring. There is talk and design considerations being made that there will be a entry point into the garage off the motor court, if you will, if it develops into a motor court at the terminus of Columbus Street. That would be north on the plan here. And then where the red line is plan left, that will be approximately where the new pedestrian alley will traverse from St. Philip to King between the 2 projects. The application is actually revised to 2 trees requiring a special exception. The one elm ended up measuring 23.5. That is, and then the adjacent tree, the 34-inch elm, is the larger green or orange circle, if you will. And I'll show you pictures. And then the 778 10.5 magnolia, multi-stem, multi-leader magnolia. That's the yellow tree in the center of the site. And then of course, all those little green circles with X's are holly trees, 8, 10, 12, and then a couple other larger protected trees. Here's a closer zoom in, if you will. So you can see the arrows off of Spring. That would be a point of ingress egress. You can see there's a triangular diamond to get circulation moving interior to the site, and then arrows going on the north side of that, if you will, that would lead into a garage. Some of this, I believe, is subterranean garage. It's below grade. And then an exit in a point of ingress egress on St. Philip, a loading dock area for the senior living component, deliveries to the kitchen and what have you. I'll let the applicants get into the program of the building if you're interested. And then other activation type units on King Street as well as St. Philip. So again, Natural Directions did the evaluation. I went out on site with the team. So the elm trees are volunteers. You can see they're growing up against a masonry wall today with a lot of rubble around the base. There's a significant storm damage in the major leader, if you will. You can see, so it's a D grade. The tree to the right is 23.5. The magnolia tree was a planted tree in a parking lot island. You know, one would argue, what's a branch, what's a leader? We decided on 7, 7, 8, 10.5. So a multi-leader measuring at those sizes, a grade C due to the included bark. So staff recommends approval with the condition to plant 41 caliber inches. That's for the grand trees, native canopy trees on the project site. The project site is massive. It's mostly building and circulation. So whatever they can't get on site, they'll make a contribution to the city street tree program. Must plant 225 caliber inches for the protected trees. So this was a 3-acre site. They had over the amount to be preserved for 3 acres, 45 trees. So I take the 45 times 5 inches per tree and you come up with 225. Again, project site or make a contribution to the city street tree program. If during the evolution through BAR and any other process, if there's any tree to be preserved, left over in a corner, in a plaza, whatever it may be, we'll use 4-foot chain link fence, but we'll also include that for any adjacent street trees. Must provide a grading and landscape plan for staff review and approval. Again, with the, you know, the grades with the garage below grade and all the, if there's any trees to be preserved. And then must have a certified arborist prune and treat any grand trees to be preserved. And I think these are really carryovers from a previous slide, but they're still good to be included. So anyway, we will then identify Abigail Richardson, Patrick Allen. I don't see him. He may be a telephone call. And then Christophe Germain. So Abigail, are you on a phone? If you could raise your hand. Abigail,
Okay.
Raise your hand. Can you hear us? Somebody's raising their hand. Who may that be?
That's Abigail.
Abigail.
Abigail, can you hear us? *6 or *9, are you on a phone? How about Christophe, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Abigail? Can you hear us, Abigail? Patterson Farmer, let's promote Patterson.
Okay, so I just see a little chat thing pops up from Abigail Richardson. Everyone I can hear. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start. I don't know if what do I dial on cell phone? Eric, what does she
Hey,
dial
guys,
on the cell phone? Do you know?
Patterson here. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, Patterson.
Yeah, I'm walked over to Abby's desk. I'm gonna give my phone here to her.
Okay.
Yeah, Abigail was asking what to dial on the phone.
Abigail,
All
can you
right,
hear
do
us?
we have,
Hey guys, can y'all hear us?
Yes.
yes, we can.
All right, Abigail's here.
Abigail.
Abigail, I'm assuming you're the one that's going to speak first. So let me swear you in for the record and then state your name and address. Go ahead and start, okay?
Okay.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
All right, go ahead.
Abigail Richardson, 501 Wando Park Boulevard, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, 29464.
All right, go ahead.
Thank y'all for your time tonight. I'm Abigail with Stephen Whiteside. We're the civil engineer on the project. Eric did a great job explaining the Liberty King Street project at the corner of King Spring and St. Philip Street. It is a senior living facility that's going to be 7 to 8 stories tall. And we are requesting the removal of 3 grand trees and 56 protected trees in order to build the full build out of this somewhat massive building that's going to take up almost half of a city block. So we appreciate y'all's consideration and time tonight in reviewing this application. And I'm here to answer any questions if you have any questions for us.
All right, thank you, Abigail. Is there anybody else on your team that wishes to add anything or address the board?
Patrick or Christoph, would y'all like to add anything?
No, I mean, it's a very high urban, building, and then there's a courtyard in the center, so it's pretty much in the same profile of most of the building we've been working on in the center of the city. So this is what it is, and part of the drives and the parking actually under the building.
All right, then Eric, is there anybody that was registered to speak in favor or opposed to the application?
Nobody registered to speak in favor or oppose the application, nor did I receive any public comment.
And then we'll close this application to the public. It'll be open to the board for discussion.
I just want to correct Abigail. The one tree measured 23.5, so it's 1 special exception, 1 variance.
Okay. All right. I'll just let anybody on the board have questions or comments.
I mean, essentially they're clear cutting the site, right? I mean,
yes.
I'm still like kind of at a loss as to we're saying the hardship is they want to get an underground garage. That qualifies. I'm asking.
That's a fair question. I thought the same thing too, but so many of our inner city applications, it seems like that's what it is that there's boom, we just take everything out and we put building up. I don't know if that's the right approach. I would admit, I mean, when you look at that site plan, I don't see any place to put replacement trees on site.
There's a few trees going to be planted in the corner where the elms are. Actually, this is the one spot that will be still open air. And the problem is really about senior living with an X amount of rooms. So basically, this is what the site, there's not only just living, but also facilities, medical facilities included in the project. So that's why the scale of the project is so large, as the amenities basically include everything.
And for clarification, this is not just for an underground parking garage. This is going to be a full 8-story building with a below grade parking garage. So it's going to be a complete infill of the property with building.
There's only 1 level of parking on the half of the site, actually.
Yes, yeah. Well, this is what's been happening. We've changed from our historic footprint, and we're erasing that anyway. But and that's what we're seeing now, because all of Courier Square has been these big things, and we had 2 meetings ago that they're just the entire block. And then one of the justifications in there is one of my personal beefs of the BAR issue, where they want everything directly to the street and then all the landscape materials go. What's more important? What ranks higher? Is it vegetation, global warming, working against heat islands, or is it, putting in as much impervious surface as we can? So whatever, it's discussion for another day.
Let me ask this question on the site plan that we're currently looking at, the property line or I should say maybe the red line that runs north-south from St. Philip up to King Street. That's, Eric, I think where you indicated the pedestrian walk was going to go.
Yes,
do we
so
Is we're taking away the fabric.
Yes, and that's proposed to be a private pedestrian alleyway that will be heavily landscaped and somewhat of a Charleston garden feel between the two projects.
It'll be actually split between the two projects. So half of the easement is in one property and the easement is on the other one. And actually it's the same architect and same design team. So we're working together to create, it's actually a semi-private public as well. And it'll be actually allowing public to go through the site.
Do we have an idea of what the actual width of that area is? Is it 10 feet? Is it 20 feet?
It's about 20 feet. It's actually, if you know, Princess Street is about the same width as Princess Street. If you know, behind the Saks building, that's exactly the width of that.
Right, and the plant materials there got espalier against.
Well, this is going to be only pedestrian, so there's no cars. So there will be actually trees, full trees, and those will be entrance of residential units. So it will be a full landscaped alleyways, much more garden-like than anything else. It's almost what we're doing for the Line Street project, which is only pedestrian for the purpose of it. And there's also an entry court at the front. That's a U-shaped building that's facing Concord Street. That's fully open with trees as well. And there is also a courtyard in the center of the building on the ground, which will be a garden as well. So there is actually a pocket of gardens within the block, but as they want the facade to follow King Street, like you said, and everything has to follow the streetscapes of the street. So there's not much left, of the site open.
Yeah. Well, let me ask this question. I understand that the streetscape is there, but we've also got on this slide, right in the upper right corner of the site plan I'm looking at, where it says property line. Mm-hmm. We've got opportunity to maybe make sure we create landscape area between those two buildings. I don't know if we need to address the width of this pedestrian walkway and make sure it's large enough that we can truly substantially plant.
There is actually a walkway existing from the existing property that's already there that access actually the residential units that are on the corner. So what we will do is actually we're going to combine what we are leaving as a landscape piece and have that walkway as part of the centerpiece. So it's almost like the same process we're doing with the other property, but this one is already here, and we'll integrate that into the landscape. So that will be the same way a pedestrian walkway through the corner. It could maybe privatized or not, because right now it's really for private access to a few residential units. But that's what we're looking at, is basically for what is on our side of the property will be only landscape, not paving, because the paving already exists along that property. It's a narrow brick walkway that goes around the units. We've looked at in one of the properties, actually, each one of them, we're working with the neighbors to improve either the walls of their gardens or increase as much as we can pedestrian access and flow throughout the whole block. We're going to create some diagrams that are going to show that during the BR, but try to make it as open as possible and as movable as possible throughout the whole site where we need to. Since it's senior living, we don't want to have fully opened public and everywhere, because those are elderly with mental issues and other things. So there's also some term of safety and at the same level, but as much as we can keep it permeable for the public, especially between the next phase on the west side or the north side. And then this project we definitely will create like a Charleston alleys and Charleston, those kind of hidden pathways that only people from Charleston knows about. So that's kind of the idea of surrounding the buildings and connecting the building together as much as possible.
Thank you. I almost want Amanda to let me know, or Andrew, and anybody, Ruthie, Calvin, Jeff. For me, it would almost help if I saw that proposed landscape plan versus right now, I just see a big old buildings plopped on the property. And I don't see how there's any real vegetation. I understand that, oh, there's going to be this pedestrian walkway, but it would be nice to actually see it defined. And here's what this meandering path or this straight shot path would look like versus leaving it up to really putting all the onus onto Eric to make sure that the site can get landscaped.
Yeah, we're putting a site plan together. So we're finishing our site plans this week for the BR for next week. So we will, in 2 weeks. So we'll have definitely a full landscape plan developed, for this one in a week or so. And then you'll see where the landscape is present, definitely. And what type of trees. There'll be palms and hollies basically in the alleyway going down with a small narrow path with kind of stoop gardens in front of each one of the units and an outdoor cafe terrace on the corner. I mean, there's a bunch of public space that will be created.
That alley, the public alley currently, Eric, can you go back to your the image that shows what's existing?
Excuse me, go back to what image?
The colored the colored GIS maps.
Aerial.
Where the aerial?
Right. So the Rogers Alley today is, as you can see, about maybe 2/5 of the way south of Bogard. All right. And it's a through alley from St. Philip to King. They're going through a
Public
process.
right of way, correct?
Yes.
Public right of way, city right of ways. It's going through the process to be abandoned. And again, at meetings above my pay grade, the idea is to then
move it.
So here where the red line is, plan left of the Liberty King Street, that is Bogard Street on the south side. So the alley, the pedestrian alley will be a little offset from that. It will go in off of St. Philip, have a slight jog in it, and then traverse out to King Street north of Columbus.
If you're looking this, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
If you're looking at sidewalks on the side.
Eric, if we could mute the applicant.
Take you away something historic.
I'm sorry.
Something else.
And then we can have our discussion and we'll throw a question to them if we want.
Okay. Yeah, Scott. Yeah. So, yeah.
Eric, is this something that, this is Ruthie, is this something that should be deferred until more information can be provided about the landscape plan?
Well, that would be your call. I think my suggestion would be to address the elm tree, special exception, fact-finding function. If we look at that tree, I mean, I think they're trying to be good neighbors. I believe Abigail, we can unmute and verify, but they're working with that neighbor. That wall is caving in. It's about to fall toward that blue house. So I think they're proposing to be good neighbors and rebuild that wall as part of the project. That's what I believe I heard in the field, and it is cracked. There's no doubt that tree's applying pressure. And the fact that the crown, the major leader, as you can see the picture to the right, significant storm damage. It's laying up in there, and it's an elm.
All the stuff around the base of the tree. Like,
Yeah, I'm not
looking at a big limb right in the bottom right.
I'm not sure how it came to be, but you got vacant lots up there, you got gravel lots and so on and so forth. So then you go back to the variance tree, the magnolia, which is a multi-leader tree. It being so centered in the site, I think they meet the hardship test due to the perimeter shape of the lot, where you have, yes, you can argue that the properties that are owned by Post and Courier surface, you know, they have those 3 buildings that are empty right at the terminus of Columbus, and then you do have Rogers Alley. That's a public piece of land in there separating all the, but when you combine it all, that tree sits right at the end of that whitish looking parking area, the magnolia, at the end of what I believe were planted hollies. I don't know if it was to screen Rogers Alley. You know, I'm not sure. I don't know the history of that parking lot at all. It's been there as long as I know. I've been here 24 years as the employee parking lot for the Postal Courier. Why they put all those holly trees in there, I don't know. But based on the shape of the lot, they have the right, and if they're successful, city council has to go through the abandonment process, and I understand there's support for that. And that magnolia and the holly trees are just kind of perpendicular, and they are what they are. I don't know why they planted so many. And the ginkgo, just kind of an oddball.
I think that was done early on in the early days of the ordinance. This parking lot, the improvements to it, before you got here. And the magnolia, go back to the picture of the magnolia.
I don't know. Maybe Lee could chime in on that. I don't know how long that parking lot's been there. I guess angled parking, I guess they meet the landscape. I don't think there's any trees in those landscape islands, so.
Doesn't look like it.
If they were planted under, sorry, go ahead, what?
Can we look at the magnolia tree picture? Because I think it was called stunted, but isn't there an overhead power line going on top over it? Or is that just something else in the picture? Do you see that line?
It's funny that
No.
Abigail,
The one that shows above the tree. The one that shows the sky above the magnolia. Keep going. Okay, see on the bottom right, is that a power line that's running over the tree? So that's why it's been.
it may be. I don't remember noticing that, but squatty is my term.
Black line.
Abigail picked up on my. It's a squatty southern magnolia. That's too funny. She added that adjective, but anyway. It's a squatty one, and it's multi-stem, but it could be because of that line. I didn't notice that line actually. But you can see it's probably got some girdling roots around it. It looks like I'm noticing there, and just it's not a great
basket.
Doesn't have great form.
I guess I would say, personally, when looking at the trees, I think Eric's right that magnolia, its location in the center, on just about any, if there was no building or anything on that site, people would look at it and say that tree just is growing in the wrong place. The elm tree doesn't look like it's doing too well or is going to do well. I think my biggest concern is the uncertainty of what gets planted back, and just making sure that we get some green on this property. And I think that there's a great opportunity with that pedestrian walkway, just making sure that it is wide enough that we aren't just planting palm trees on it. It'd be nice to have a shade tree in there or something other than just palm trees going up.
Something that provides a reasonable photosynthesis.
Right, and I mean ultimately, that is something that I guess we could put in our motion to make sure that we just put all the burden on Eric's shoulders, that as they work through that landscape plan and all, that they make sure that if the building has to be adjusted 5 feet or 4 feet or something, that it's done to provide that space that we're looking for.
Yeah, we're clearly looking.
I don't think, I was gonna say, I don't think shade's gonna be a problem in that planned north-south alley. It's a 7-story building next to it.
I think also
right.
The area where the magnolia is where the courtyard will be, and there's no way that you're going to build that and not be getting into the roots of that magnolia, even if we tried to save that one. Right, that's where the courtyard is, but we don't know what that is because there's no plant material shown. Right, but that's what that is, right, Christoph?
I think Eric, if you could unmute applicants so he could respond to that.
Abigail?
Yes.
And Abigail and or Christoph.
Yeah, the courtyard is actually on top of the garage, so the tree cannot be preserved, unfortunately. But we
Okay.
are putting, yeah, this is where the garage stops, actually, that footprint. But we do plan on, because this is where most of the patients are going to be there, we do plan on planting some large canopy trees and some smaller trees and flowers. I mean, it's going to be pretty much a high use for them as a green space. And there will be also some upper level gardens for therapy with trees in them as well.
So this is going to be, when you say senior living, is it independent senior living, or is it all assisted living and dementia care and stuff?
It goes to pretty much a level where you're fairly independent, to the point where you can have dementia and people with high problem of Parkinson or other type of disease, and there will be spaces. That's why the building on St. Philip's is dedicated to medical treatments, a 3-story building. The buildings on St. Philip's and on Springs are much shorter, they're much lower. But there will be a series of courtyard and gardens throughout the whole space. I mean, it is definitely a large footprint, and then we're definitely planting that alleyways as much as you can. You know, as you said, it's a 7-story building or 6-story building on both sides, and it will step out like like the typical cake, stepping away and getting more light in the middle. But we will produce also some sections through all those alleys for review. So want to make sure they will understand. It's hard to read definitely as a black and white drawing, and even as a color drawing. So we will provide some sections and some views of what the space would look like.
All right, thank you.
I think
Really?
the suggestion wasn't a bad one. How do people feel about that?
Say
About
again, Amanda?
landscape
I missed
plan,
that.
deferring and having the landscape plan.
I mean, I just think a deferral to allow a little bit more clarity on this is reasonable.
I'm coming down on Eric's side. I mean, Magnolia and the elm. Yeah, I'm with you. They probably should go. The rest, I really couldn't speak to.
Well, but we are supposed to have the protected trees per acre, the 15 protected trees per acre.
So Amanda or Eric, because I am not sure. So can we, as a board, propose a deferral, or does the applicant have to request it, a deferral?
No, we as we can move to defer the application and request additional information for when it comes back before us.
Right, but we can also approve for the elms a special exception and the magnolias a variance.
Yeah, I
That's
see.
correct.
Here's the thing. I don't know that I have with Andrew and Eric. I don't know that I have an issue with the removal of those 2 trees. I think my issue is every other tree is coming off the property too, and not knowing what's going back on and seeing what does the picture look like after it's built.
I would agree.
But is that really our purview? Because I think that it meets I always say it meets the hardship test for the magnolia and the elm. But
Can we go back to the request?
The staff recommendations?
No, the request, Eric.
So it was requested variance to allow the removal of 1 grand tree, and then requested special exception to allow the removal of 2, but one of those trees was smaller, I think.
Yes.
Is that right, Eric?
Yes.
And then the final one was requesting a variance to omit the 15 protected trees per acre requirement. And
Again, this is a 3-acre site, so 45 trees to be maintained. I can't remember. I thought I counted near 65 trees existing. So, they're proposing to remove them all. So, but the mitigation's just set up on what would be required to be maintained. So 45 times 5 is the 225 in mitigation.
We can always take each item separately and vote on them. Right? You could take the first special exception, the first variance. And then, because I have heartburn about removing just so much, even though they're small, they're hackberries, they're hollies, but they're still a habitat and they still suck up water. So, how do you how do you replace that? We don't know what's going back.
Eric, could we see the staff recommendations one more time?
So 41 inches, that's based on the category of the tree, 100% for the magnolia, 1/4 of the DBH for the elm. Again, the calculation for it's a 3-acre site requiring 45 trees, and they're over that with all the hollies and of the like I said. So, but I just take the number that would be required and multiply that by 5, which is for each protected tree. The ordinance says that you replace with 2 2.5-inch trees. So that's 5 inches. And that gets you to 225. And then the others are, if there's any, during the process, if there's any way to preserve a tree, we barricade it with chain link fence and present a landscape plan and prune if necessary.
I think I'm going to make a motion to approve with recommendations.
All right, so there was a motion for approval with the staff's conditions. Is there going to be a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Oh, all right, so we'll say a motion by Ms. Ravenel and seconded by, was that you, Kelvin?
Yes.
Okay. And so I'm going to go through the roll. Ms. Barton,
Nay, not in favor.
Ms. Ravenel,
I in favor.
Mr. Webb,
I in favor.
Mr. Yuji,
I in favor.
Mr. Hargit,
I'm gonna abstain.
all right, so abstain, making it tough here. So Mr. Adrian's going to say I in favor, only because I believe that the 2 tree removals are justified, and I'm going to put the onus on Eric to make sure we get this site re-landscaped. So it would be approved 4-1.
Yeah, I think on something this big where there's, where it's scorched earth, I think we really should have an idea of what's going back in. Because obviously a lot of work has gone into it and they're getting it ready for BAR, but they didn't have it ready for this meeting. So I have a problem with that.
I agree.
I'm just saying my piece.
So noted.
All right, so we're going to go to our final item on the agenda, which is going to be item B3. It is King and Lion Street, application number 210505B3. TMS numbers are 460-0802-007, 010 through 013, 015, 109 through 114, 117 through 122, and 124.
Joel, this is Ruthie. I have to abstain from this one.
Okay.
I didn't realize. I sent you an email.
Excellent. Okay, so Ms. Ravenel, we thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
We still have 5 of us, so we're still good for our quorum. The application is requesting a variance from section 54-327 to allow the removal of 7 grand trees. Request a special exception from section 54-327 to allow the removal of 1 grand tree. And request a variance from section 54-327 to omit the 15 protected trees per acre requirement zoned GBA.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the application. This is their responses to the hardship test, and I'll revisit this in just a moment.
Oh, yeah.
This incorporates portions of the last application because they're kind of split in one parcel, and then all those other parcels owned by the Evening Post and Post and Courier, except for a couple that they do not control on Line Street and Spring Street or St. Philip. Again, zone GBA. Note here that Ackerman's Court is a public right of way. And again, that particular court is also going through the abandonment process. So that will have city council action and public works. Here we have, again, the surface employee parking lot. Note the green section about midway. We'll come and visit those trees. That's where the majority are. The gravel white area off of King Street, that used to have existing buildings. They received BAR approval and they've been scraped. The corner lot at Line and King has been a gravel lot as long as I know. I think that's where they park their newspaper delivery trucks. And then there's a vacant lot at Line and St. Philip that's got some vegetation on it, and again is a vacant lot. So again, this project incorporates the majority of the Post and Courier property. This one may give you a little bit of better idea of that alley. Again, the way this is oriented, Line Street is planned right, St. Philip is planned north, King Street planned south. The gray area indicates open to the sky alley. So again, plan left of the multifamily structure with mixed use on the ground floor and the parking deck. That's that alley that we spoke of, the gray area that has the slight jog. It's slightly north of Bogart and then traverses through King Street. Then, of course, they have a pedestrian way separating the main principal building with other residential structures as it scales down to St. Philip Street. The corner at St. Philip and Line, again, the buildings scale down as it transitions into that Cannonboro, Elliottboro neighborhood. And then the main pedestrian or vehicular access wraps around the properties that they don't have control of, except for the little piece in the middle there, that little block they do. But so again, a very large residential project with obviously King Street retail and office and of the like. This is the surveys. I took an inset out of this. There's a green space that I spoke to in the aerial that has the majority, is home to the majority of the grand trees. The large dot, if you look at the inset or off, the inset to the right, there's a laurel oak that's growing actually through the chain link fence. That's that large dot on the north. And then you have a 37-inch live oak, a 34-inch live oak, a 34-inch magnolia, and then a 37-inch live oak in that parking lot island. This is another piece of the property. So here's the site plan enlarged a little bit for you. Again, to orient yourself here, St. Philip to the north, plan north, Line east, and then King Street plan. Note the line of trees bisecting the site, and then the two oddball trees that were, I think, volunteer in nature and have grown to such a size. Again, I blew this up again for you to see the pedestrian circulation alley out to King Street. The main vehicular, again, accessing the garage that's wrapped with residential, and then the shared pedestrian alley traversing from St. Philip to King Street. Again, Columbus Street is a little bit to the plan west. So those two driveways on the south side of King Street are the driveways to the loading dock area of the print house. But Columbus Street, if you recall, was the terminus of the other project, Liberty.
Why aren't these streets labeled? Are they not labeled?
They are. King Street Here it is, King Street,
Okay,
St. Philip.
yep.
Then, of course, this shows the protected trees. Again, for whatever reason, there's a row of holly along the fence line where the large live oaks, and then a couple other, oaks throughout, basically following fence lines and property lines, or what had been fence lines and property lines. These are the photos that the applicant submitted. I'll get into more detail. So this is, I'm standing with my back to King Street. I'm about midway in the parking lot, and I'm looking toward the exit gate, the controlled access exit gate on St. Philip, and you can just see the spread of the crowns. This is the first one in the row, and then if you look closely over the gate in the background, it's almost the same distance over that drive aisle for the other oak down the line. We'll start from St. Philip, work our way toward King Street in that row, and then we'll address the oddball trees that are kind of just throughout on the north side. So this is a 27-inch laurel oak. You can see it's literally growing out and through the fence. Volunteer, obviously. And the shot on the right is looking south on St. Philip, how it comes out. And it's not a very high crown tree, but it's over the sidewalk. This is the first tree heading again toward King Street in that green space. Again, I don't know the history behind this parking lot. I don't know why such a large space was here. Obviously, I think maybe these trees existed and they worked around them. I have no clue. Behind them, you see the row of holly trees and some crepe myrtles, but this is the first live oak, 22.5, 28B. This is the second tree, 33-inch live oak B, a co-dominant. And again, you can see how this one's kind of oddly shaped. It doesn't have a very symmetrical crown. In between this tree and the next live oak, in amongst the almost underneath the canopies, you have a 7.5, 7.5, 8, 11-inch Southern Magnolia C. And then in that parking lot island, and about where my truck is parked on the photo right, just a few feet, there's a little white mark, if you will, in front of between the tree and my vehicle. It drops off about a foot there. I apologize, I didn't take a picture of that, but the building that once sat there was abutting this tree. So it again has a odd shaped crown. And then the roots, you can see the exposed roots when they tore that building out. They ran parallel to the building about 5 feet off the back of that curb. I think it's shown here. See the picture, top picture, second one in. You can see a dark line in front of that live oak. That's where the foundation of the building was. It's kind of built up, I guess, a lot of leaf matter, and then there's roots that ran along the foundation there. But that's that tree. And then the last live oak, which is at the controlled access off of King Street in very small soil volume, but grew to quite a size, is a 14, 18, 18.5 live oak B. Then the 24-inch pecan, that's north of that row of trees. It is amongst a lot of volunteers. You can see I zoomed in on a cavity on the left co-dominant leader once it splits. And then on the other side of the trunk, you can see where either somebody pruned or it broke out and then somebody pruned. There's a cavity there. And then over by where they park their delivery trucks near the corner of Line and King, you have this elm tree that's 27.5, and D, because the arborist evaluation found that it was hollow. So back to this image. So you have the row running basically from St. Philip to King. Again, all the hollies along that fence line, a few trees out on St. Philip, and then the spattering of protected trees around the properties that once existed along property lines or what have you on the north side. When you read their hardship, number one, extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to this particular piece of property. They have the right to assemble these lots. It's all under one ownership. The location of the significant grand trees, they're not all perimeter trees. They do bisect the site. Again, the irregular shape of the property, I think, can play into this with validity, because they have to work around properties they don't control. And again, the program of the site and how they're addressing the neighborhood. And again, the shared alley, this is all, I think, discussions outside my wheelhouse, but to have meetings with the city and the city agreeing to abandon right away and then do the shared alley between the two projects. I think, there was definitely a need for that connection, pedestrian connection versus vehicular. I won't touch on D. I'll let the applicants discuss that. These conditions do not generally apply to other property. Again, we're in the urban core. We got vast amounts of vacancy lots under common ownership. There are others that we have addressed in further south and immediately south. Because of these conditions, the application to the would unreasonably restrict. Again, I'll let the applicant team address that. And then I do have a couple of letters of support, neighborhood support. I can tell you that I've heard at many different levels the effort that they have put forth to speak with Cannonboro, Elliottboro, and again, the pedestrian connectivity. One would argue that Rogers Alley is a sidewalk. It's very narrow. That provides connectivity from St. Philip to King, but to enhance that with a beautified and scaled, appropriately scaled. There you have it. So before I get into reading these letters, I should proceed. Well, actually, I'll read these letters once I'm called upon by the chairman. I'm sorry. Staff recommends approval with the condition to plant 294.75 caliber inches of native canopy trees on the project site. Again, between the pedestrian ways, the vehicular loop, the common pedestrian alley, they will try to do their best to get as many inches on site, and then the residual will be made up in a contribution to the city street tree program. Must plant 250 caliper inches. This site is 3.3 acres, and they have over the required number of trees, 50 trees, 49.5, we round up. So 50 trees would have to be in there over that. So native canopy trees must use 4-foot length if as needed, including the existing street trees. Landscape plan for staff approval. If applicable, must have a certified arborist prune and treat the grand and protected trees to be preserved. And I think a project of this scale, I think the time is warranted that they should, if you grant approval to remove the trees, then they have to provide good faith documentation to repurpose the live oak wood somehow into the project. So with that said, we should recognize the remaining individual, Ben Libitrau. J. Claypool, Patterson Farmer, Rivers Cape. And on my list, let's have Ben identify himself first. I don't know if another individual listed here is part of their team. Ben, can you hear us?
I can, Eric. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Is Chrissy Pringle part of your team?
Yeah, we just signed up a few folks to answer questions if need be. That would apply to Chrissy Patterson and Jay Claypool, if indeed needed.
Okay.
Question.
Okay, very good. So, Mr. Chairman, you have Ben Labattrell.
All right, Ben, I'm going to swear you in and then state your name and address for the record. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
All right, state your name and address, and the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Ben Levitrow, 465 Meeting Street, Suite 500, Charleston, South Carolina, 29403. Good evening. My name is Ben Levitrow. I'm going to speak on behalf of Gray Star and Evening Post Partnership. Eric did a great job describing our mixed-use project of multifamily retail and office. As he mentioned, we've spent an extensive amount of time over the past 6 to 9 months with the city, with our surrounding neighborhoods. And these conversations and extensive site planning, use, and massing dialogue have been very positive. We're very proud of the support we've received from those. We know tonight we're asking a big ask for these variances. We realize we're asking for a number of removals, but we believe our application has merit and meets the tests. First of all, the extraordinary and exceptional conditions. A lot of the trees are well located within the property line. This is a full city block that will ultimately be covered by a series of large mixed-use buildings. We've had substantial back and forth with the city, neighbors, other constituents to factor in a number of requests and desires, which has created challenging conditions of providing sufficient density while also paying great respect to the perimeter of the site that faces the community. We've also broke up the buildings into 4 buildings to introduce substantial pedestrian alleyways throughout. A lot of the density and footprint has to occur in the interior to accommodate efficient parking, not only our main building, but also parking for the perimeter buildings and an adjacent site. We are uniquely situated in an urban commercial site. Early on, Line Street was established kind of as our preferred sole ingress egress with the city and others, and that further limited our ability for vehicular access onto other streets. Lastly, Gray Star and EPI have voluntarily provided a number of workforce housing units and fees well in exceedance the ordinance to further their goals. There's additional building coverage and efficiencies kind of necessary to accommodate our unprecedented commitment. In terms of other properties in vicinity, we feel that a number of them don't really have the number of centrally located grand trees as this site. We're not sure that other sites have so graciously given up kind of perimeter mass and density and provided such extensive workforce housing commitments as this particular project. Frankly, the application of the ordinance to the site, we do believe would prohibit this proposed project from being built. Areas of the site with trees are critical for locating parking and the taller components of the site. Without the granting of these variances, this project with its concessions in the neighborhoods and support really would preclude it from happening. Lastly, I mentioned the character of the district, and of course, ensuring it would not be harmed. We're of the opinion and believe we have supporters that this project would actually enhance the character and fabric. This very district being referred to here supports this project. We have very vocal and strong support, including Canterbury Elliott Borough Neighborhood Association, unanimous approvals of rezone from Planning Commission and City Council. And, beyond those letters of support, we've also seen complimentary and very supportive comments regarding our community engagement and benefit from the city staff and the mayor's office as well. A few other things, and I will be quiet, but I heard some mention earlier about, landscape plan on the previous project. This project provides extensive pedestrian connections. It's a big part of the focus on this site. the north-south alley Eric discussed that separates our project from Liberty's. We've got another north-south alleyway with stoops and opportunities really there to promote further planting and pedestrian interaction through a site that's really traditionally been a private surface parking lot. We providing above and beyond workforce housing. It's a needed shot in the arm. It's a substantial benefit to the public good and the city's housing needs. And finally, we're right in the middle of the urban core. This is a very urban site with surrounding uses and fabric that we believe are urban and dense in nature. So we kindly ask for your approval as the variance. We agree to Eric's recommendations for the very substantial mitigation requirements, as well as the live oak incorporation that he discussed, something we've actually provided in previous projects as well. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben, is there anybody else on the call that on your team that wants to speak before questions, or and that close this, or are we good?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And Eric, I think you said there were some letters of support that we need to read in.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we received 2 emails. The first is in support. It came today from Marion Hawkins. The email is basically the same as C letter attached. So I'll read the letter. She basically, I think, or he brought the text of the email from the letter. So Eric Schultz, Zoning Department, City of Charleston, 2 George Street, May 5, 2021. Eric, the Cannon Barrow Elliott Barrow Neighborhood Association supports the May 5, 2021 BZA-SD submittal for variances and a special exception request from Courier Square Phase 2. City project ID number TRC SP 2021-000409. While the applicant, Seaman Whiteside, and the owner, Evening Post Publishing Company, are asking to remove grand trees and omit the 15 protected trees per acre requirement for the property located at Line and King Street, granting this request will benefit adjacent properties and the surrounding neighborhood district, given the substantial concessions the owner and developer, Graystar, have made in the community and their unprecedented commitment to workforce housing on this project. We greatly encourage the board to approve the request. Sincerely, Marion Hawkins, President. The second email came in today as well. Please accept this support letter for the BZA. Let me know if you have any questions. And then the letter reads as such: to Eric Schultz with my email address, May 5, 2021 BZA meeting, BZA-SD support letter for Courier Square Phase 2. I support the May 5th, 2021 BZA-SD submittal for variances and a special exception request for Courier Square Phase 2 project ID, as I already mentioned. It is very similar, but it does change at the end here. While the applicant, Seaman Whiteside, and owner, Evening Post Publishing Company, are asking to remove grand trees and omit the 15 trees per acre requirement for the property located at Line and King Street, granting this request will benefit adjacent properties in the surrounding neighborhood district, given the substantial concessions the owner and developer Graystar have made to the community and their unprecedented commitment to workforce housing on this project. As I have stated in earlier support letter for this development, as I have stated in earlier support letters for this development, the development of these parcels as proposed are vital to the success of our project and the other proposed projects in the neighborhood. We think the proposed development strikes the right balance between commercial development on the King Street corridor and the residential areas to the west. Sincerely, E. Mitchell Norville, Managing Partner, King Street and Shepherd Partners LLC, 677 King Street, 68,000 square foot office building and associated parking. Shepherd Street Parking LLC, 86 Shepherd Street duplex renovation and parking for office building. And SSR Investors, 88, 90, 92, 94 Shepherd Street, 7 apartment unit renovation. That's the end of that letter.
All right, well, thank you. Was there anybody else registered to speak in favor or oppose this application?
Nobody registered to speak in favor or oppose the application, nor did I receive any other public comment.
Okay, then the application will be closed to the public and to be open to the board for discussion and questions. I'll start and say that I think that the applicant was right when he says this is a big ask, because we're looking at four grand trees that the arborist has labeled as a B grade tree. So maybe some strange forms, some issues, but not D grades and not even C's. So it's a challenge. My first question would be, looking at the site plan that we have here, the grand in the lower left corner of the site, which I guess would be southeast, if I'm looking at that north arrow correct. It looks like it's right at the end, right by King Street, right at the end of that pedestrian path. Any way that one could be saved, it might be a nice way to either start your pedestrian path or end it as you're traveling down there. Maybe it might be a good one to keep, and then just jog the building around it. Just my opinion, could be wrong. I think all of them had, when you look at the pictures, it's somewhat difficult because the canopies look beautiful on several of them, and they look healthy. Also, on that same site plan that we have here, Eric, it looks like if we go to the along, oh gosh, what is that, Line Street, and if you head towards St. Philip, not the left-right turn out, but if you go closer to St. Philip, it looks like maybe that's the little drive that comes in. And there's some of the trees right on that shared property line by the driveway that are just being taken out. I can't really tell what they are, but it doesn't appear that they're impacted by anything.
Like an elm, a hackberry. It's a little dicey after that.
Okay.
Yeah, they're volunteer elms and hackberries. The hackberries, as we know, in this in this image, had some foliage on them, but as Andrew well knows, where they're being attacked by whatever. The elms, volunteers, tough trees. To be honest with you, I apologize. I didn't go look. I don't know if there's a fence along that common property line. Can't quite tell here. Looks like there is a fence. So there are volunteers on a fence line.
If nothing else, maybe that's a location where we can get some of our replacement trees.
I had a question about, I was looking in the zoning ordinance, and I know I've read before about abuse to grand trees.
Yes.
Which that elm certainly qualifies, that we saw the truck on top of. So I think that's something that's noteworthy. Yeah, that was at bottom right. Tree abuse picture. This is, I understand the workforce housing. I understand that we're taking away the pattern of King Street and making it much larger and taller. I've got a real problem with this. And I think I'm probably gonna have to abstain because I don't think I can vote for this.
Well, then I would say vote against versus abstaining.
After abstained, I mean, obviously it's like,
yeah. Should have twisted his arm too.
I think I abstained because I was for the removal in the last one of the larger trees, but not the 15 clearance. So that
was my problem with that one too.
This site is completely different. I agree with Joel's assessment. And then, again, I go back to, I know you all love the political and stuff is. I don't care if they're killing puppies in this thing. It doesn't matter to me. Building's the building. It's irrelevant. So workforce housing or donating kidneys or doing bad things, it doesn't matter as far as site design goes. I appreciate Ben's salesmanship though. It was a good point, but it just doesn't work on me. And I think that if they designed around one of those live oaks previously, as Eric, I guess, hypothesized in that parking lot, you know, so then somebody at some point in time made a decision, hey, this tree is worthy of saving, so we're not gonna park around it, and they kind of went around it. And now we're saying, yeah, that was a good effort, but we don't care. So I mean, I agree with Joel's assessment, but I would actually add the other oak at the upper section near the laurel oak, which as far as I'm concerned, they can cut down the orange one because it's a laurel oak, it's 27 inches. How much more time does it have?
Yeah.
3 in the center, you know, I get it. It's in the center. You know, but it seems to me I ought to be able to work around those 2 on the extremes. But, you know, again, I feel like the Lorax, I speak for the trees. I know the trees don't vote, but our whole thing is always supposed to have been like, we're supposed to watch out for the trees.
I agree. I think that's well said.
Yes.
Hey, Joel, I also was looking at that lower left tree. Can someone zoom in or what was the size and species of that lower left?
The live oak, it's, yeah, there it is.
14, 18, 18.5 live oak B.
That one? Okay.
No, but that one there, yeah.
The worst of the live oaks, form wise, right?
Yeah, potentially, but it's already used to growing in a crappy area.
Yep.
So we're looking, that's Line Street behind it in the picture on the left then, right?
That's King Street.
Okay, that's
King.
Looking at the Post and Courier.
Yeah.
You're looking east.
I think that I personally think if we can save any of these B grade trees, we need to try to save them. And that one to me seemed like the obvious one to do. I look at, so if you go back to that last picture, Eric, of that tree, it may have some issues, but when you look at it, it's a magnificent tree. It's got all these crazy major limbs coming off in this big canopy, and I can't imagine cutting it down. So not that. Let's see. My internet might be slow. Nope, not that. That's the one I would like to save by the corner, and then maybe it's the next one in.
There was a picture that really showed the crown well too.
Yeah. That one. That picture, that 37-inch live oak. It's just, I look at that tree, I'm like, if I had that in my yard, I'd be thrilled.
I think they do have a valid point looking at the way the canopy is growing into the lot there for them. That's a tough thing. But again, you know, these are grand trees, and
it's tough because it's monolithic.
Yeah, while they don't vote, they're worthy of saving. I don't know.
So if we go back to this, and I appreciate your discussion, it's always robust and lively. But if you look at the extraordinary and exceptional conditions, I just want you to rethink a little bit here what they felt, or as Ben alluded to, how he feels it meets the test, and obviously the city's in support.
So if I'm looking at this, I think I personally would rule out item B on his 1B, because I think every lot downtown is irregular shaped. I mean, there are very few that are simple little, everything's got strange bumps and jogs to it. And here we're looking at pulling a bunch of them together. Whereas if they were all individual lots, you know, obviously maybe we don't have the issues. But I think that going back to 3, item 3, that, yeah, I do believe that if we had the strict enforcement of our standard on this conglomerate of parcels, that it does unreasonably restrict its use. But I would go back to thinking that we can at least save one of those trees, I think, and ask for reconsideration on that building design.
Do we have the landscape plan?
Amanda, we don't, because again, this is,
Even preliminary.
I know you don't like to hear this, but this is one of many steps in the approval process. So, as Ben alluded to, there's been an awful lot of discussion with city leaders and what have you. And I know that you don't need to hear that, but whether and maybe I need to, at staff level, ask Ben to come back in. I'm not sure. I don't know for sure where they went with BAR. I know they've been meeting, but I'd like to have Ben unmuted to discuss the urbanism. I know you guys don't like to go down that road, but I just want you to understand where they may be in the process.
Again, I would say if we're striking issues on the variance, Joel, I would also strike 1C and 1D. I mean, you're not forced to share the alley, you can come up with another way. And D, again, know my thoughts on that. Those are like made up.
Yeah.
That's salesmanship 101. Let me pile more on, see what I can get away with. Pull those emotional heartstrings.
True. Yes, I would agree with you. I think 1A, I would say the location of these significant grand trees.
Absolutely.
Lump all these parcels together. Yes, but I still think that maybe we can save that front one, at least that one by King Street.
It is they're making their own hardship though in the amassing of the properties and making a very, very, very large building. Right?
True. And maybe, I think, Eric, did you want Ben to address the, was it urbanism?
I believe it's worthy of clarification on your questions, and maybe, I don't know if it's a rebuttal, but can we bring Ben back in, Scott, please? Ben, can you hear us?
Hi. Hear me?
Great. Is there anything you'd like to add yeah.
Maybe a few thoughts that I'm also hearing that they may not be considered in this, but you're right. There has been extensive urban planning exercises. I would challenge one comment that we're putting, just massively big buildings out here. I think that this is a pretty serious departure from phase 1, which I know some people like, some people hate. I know that's not what we're discussing tonight, but there was deliberate breakup of 4 separate buildings. There was extensive back and forth with city and neighborhood constituents on what that perimeter did look like. What did that massing look like? What did it look like as you abutted those residential communities? So I would say that, we've pretty much broken up the buildings, in my opinion, about as small as they can come. I mean, if we provided small parking areas for each of the buildings here, I think what you'd end up with is a really inferior urban design than what we're showing. And so that large parking area is able to accommodate this entire city block plus a portion of the project to the south. We think that's a huge benefit. Unfortunately, parking lot's 180 feet wide, and the city doesn't allow us to have exposed sides. Neither would Greystar want to do that either. So that's all I'd say. Eric, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
But if this had come earlier, then we could have been looking at the trees a while ago before they got so far down the road with design. It's the same old chicken and egg.
It's very tough because
tree and building.
now I do appreciate that the neighborhood, if we go back to our opening statement, the neighborhood, there's nobody that wrote in that was in opposition. and the neighborhood is supportive. City staff is supportive. It just seems like we've been doing this a long time. This is one of the tougher applications that I can remember. Both of them, this one and the last one, even getting on board with. And I appreciate, the concept of breaking the buildings up. And I'll go to Andrew's salesman point. I think part of that is forced by the few parcels they didn't own. They couldn't just take the whole city block because they didn't own a couple of those little pieces of dirt. And I think ultimately, confident the architecture will look well. It will be scrutinized. There'll be attractive buildings. I still think that tree in the corner over there by King Street needs to remain.
Well, how tall are the multifamily buildings that are on the top or at St. Philip, right?
Yeah.
How tall?
Yeah, how tall are the multifamily?
Okay, we'll have to bring Ben back in and Ben.
I can answer that, Eric.
Yes,
I'm happy to answer Ms. Barton's question.
please.
Can you hear me? Oh.
Yeah, we got you.
3-story where they abut St. Philip's, and then we step back to a 5-story portion where the second blue X and the orange X are. So it kind of tears back, but we've held down those buildings on St. Philip's 3, and then the one on the north. I'm confused like Mr. Adrian on the scale. The northwest, the northwest corner of line in St. Philip's, the 3-story building. Northeast corner, the office pad on the corner of Line, and King has deliberately been held to 4, and that's actually in a 6-story zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just wondering if you could go higher and retain trees, but I understand that the neighborhood would probably want it lower. I find it interesting that the neighborhood's meeting. Because I know a lot of neighborhood associations, the executive committees have just sort of been, making decisions, and they haven't necessarily been having votes on things. So that's interesting. I guess they're doing a lot of Zooming or something. I agree with Joel. If there's any way to, I know that the city likes to have the urban corners be built through the corner. But if there was a way to retain that one tree, I agree with that. But I have huge heartburn over the others. I mean, this would be a wonderful donation of land that could then, it's a block away from the low line. And you'd have this wonderful park space.
Yeah. Well, I think that I could certainly support application if we could save that one tree. I think it's doable. I'm certain that the architect on this team will figure that out.
Somebody's dog concurs.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Somebody's dog concurs. You didn't hear that? I heard a dog.
Oh. that was the second to my comment. Yeah. All right. Well, are there other discussion points or questions?
I would just say that I agree with you, Joel.
To save the one tree and okay with the others?
Yes.
Does anybody have any other comments? Or does anybody want to make a motion? All right, I need someone to make a motion or ask a question. could be a motion for approval with staff conditions. It could be a motion to deny. It could be a motion to defer. It could be a motion to approve with additional conditions. But it needs to be a motion from one of y'all.
I don't know if this is appropriate, but I would based on all the comments and conversation, I'd like to see y'all consider a deferral with very direct and specific directions on the applicant to study that alley in relationship to that tree. If it, I mean, that I'm just thinking on their side, that's a pretty significant chunk of a building. And I'm just going to talk out loud. I don't know the program enough, but the 3-story building on St. Philip, if there are a way to, if you can't make the tree on King Street work, maybe the tree on St. Philip, since it's near the neighborhood, it has pretty decent canopy, a courtyard of some sort between those lower structures. So maybe a deferral for further study. I'm getting the sense from y'all that the interior trees may not be the issue, and I'm adding the tree on St. Philip as a peripheral tree for further study, and then the King Street tree. I'm just throwing that out there.
That's a better tree than the King Street tree form-wise.
Agree.
That's what I was wondering. Is there a way to have made a separation in those buildings there?
That's that tree. It's a pretty significant canopy. Again, you'd have to study the width of that canopy and then study how that would impact the program to provide that housing type on St. Philip Street. You know, I don't know, going back to the neighborhood and talking about a wonderful little shaded courtyard with buildings to the north and south. There is a little notch out behind that one building that doesn't look like it's occupied by building. I don't know if you could restructure the units. Again, I don't know what it looks like, but I'm just throwing that out to y'all to maybe.
I'm gonna say, Eric, I like that that option because I can tell by the lack of enthusiasm to make a motion. There probably was not overwhelming support at this time, and it would most likely benefit the applicant to defer versus end up with a disapproval or denial.
If we were to do that, I think it should be studying both and hopefully having one of them work. Right?
I agree.
You study the corner and you study the St. Philip side.
And maybe come back with a generic landscape replanting plan.
You know, again, I'm not an architect or anything, but where you have the U-shaped drive, I think that is exposed to the sun the way I see like the parking entrance. So maybe that piece that runs east-west could be, you would drive under a cantilevered portion of the building to make up some units you lose on St. Philip. Maybe I'm just talking out loud. I don't know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, Eric. I think that was very important.
Okay, obviously it's getting towards the end of the evening. So I'm going to make a motion that we defer requesting study of the grand tree at the it's hard to read this, the one at the corner of King Street, study that, and also study the one off of St. Philip Street. And then come back with, because I don't think we're going to be able to, well, I'm not going to say that. I make a motion that we defer the project for studying those two trees, the oak at King and then the oak at St. Philip's, not the laurel oak, the live oak. Okay, wait, I'm just gonna step back a minute. Should we go ahead and just give approval on the ones that we're okay with approving? And then have the other ones for study?
However you'd like to do it.
Yeah, that's your call. Do we have tree numbers on those two that we want to save so that we can just say approval for XYZ with further study on trees 1 and 2 or whatever they are?
Well, I think what you could do is
Read it.
specifically call out, let me see, on this table here. I think it's tree number 2 is the 14, 18, 18.5. No, that's the King Street tree. Yeah, that's the 14, 18, 18.5 is the King Street tree. That's number 2. And then the other one is the 22.5, 28 live oak, number 6, 2 and 6.
Okay.
What does everybody think about, do you think the whole thing needs to come back, or do you think you could do, we should do a motion to remove the ones that everybody felt like were in the middle of the building and or were in bad shape, like the laurel oak, and then have them come back with the other 2? Or just ask them to come back after studying that and then do everything at one shot?
No.
I think if they're going to redesign, which is kind of what you're asking them to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then just let them redesign, because maybe they come up with an entirely new thing. Why hem them in by saying?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so Amanda, state that motion.
Okay, I make a motion that we defer the application requesting further study of tree number 2 and tree number 6.
Perfect. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
All right, who seconded that?
Yeah.
Either me or Kelvin.
All right, Jeff, we'll put you down this time for second. Kelvin got last application. So we've got a motion for deferral with further study on trees 2 and 6 by Amanda, seconded by Jeff. I'll go through the roll. Ms. Barton,
I in favor.
Mr. Webb,
I in favor.
Eugene,
I in favor.
and Mr. Hargit.
I in favor.
Green also is I in favor. So thank you for your time, and look forward to seeing this application again.
All right. Well, thank you. That concludes the May 5th, 2021 BZA meeting. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Good night, everyone.
Happy Cinco de Mayo.
Right on.
Yes.
Back at you.
Good point. Where are margaritas?